We just ordered a carafe of champagne at Oracle Park to watch the Giants.
Sip, sip, hooray!
We're drinking Farniente at Oracle Park. Woohoo!
I'm drinking a Silver Oak Cabernet Sauvignon at Oracle Park.
And I'm drinking a Fourme Sauvignon Blanc. Sip, sip, hooray!
Baseball has long been considered America's favorite pastime. And for generations, lots of baseball fans have enjoyed a cold beer with their ball game. The song says, "Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack," but our guest today would like you to consider going to get a nice glass of wine during that seventh inning stretch or earlier. He is an old friend with a fun new gig with the San Francisco Giants. We are thrilled to have our pal Evan Goldstein back with us again today. We are the two Marys who like to eat, drink, and be merry. I'm Mary Babbitt.
I'm Mary Orland. Master Sommelier Evan Goldstein's stats are impressive. At age 26, he became the youngest person to pass the grueling Master Sommelier exam. Since then, he's been coaching wine professionals and everyday people like you and me on wine, at wineries, on the radio, and for many years, Evan was a regular guest on Mary B's and my TV show in Wine Country, telling our viewers there all the facts they needed to know to become more confident wine drinkers. Evan's been a great ambassador of Portuguese and South American wines, and he created an online wine community during the pandemic with fellow master sommeliers guiding Zoom wine tastings. Remember those? With impressive wines during the pandemic. Now, Evan is Major League Baseball's first ever team master sommelier, joining the roster of his beloved San Francisco Giants. Now, Evan is giving us an encore performance here on Sip Sip Hooray, coming back a second time to tell us about how he brings baseball fans to wine and wine lovers to baseball. And he's here to answer questions that you, our listeners, have always wanted to ask a sommelier. Evan, welcome back to Sip Sip Hooray.
Thank you so much for the lovely and kind, generous introduction and the opportunity to be with you again. I'm delighted to be I guess to follow the baseball imagining, now a veteran of the show and not just a rookie.
There you go.
Yes, and you are our first repeat guest.
Yes.
Oh, even more gratifying. Thank you so much.
Back by popular demand.
Exactly. And the reason we wanted you back is because A, you have this fun new gig with the Giants, but secondly, you're just, you have a way of breaking wine down and making it. Our goal is always to be non-intimidating and to try to help everybody understand and enjoy wine. And you make that so much easier. You have all the expertise you could ever want, but you have a way of talking to the regular person. And I sure appreciate that. As a regular Joe myself, I appreciate that.
Well, thank you. I'm grateful for Verklempt, as they say, and I will put a check in the mail immediately after this call is over.
So you've been managed to make a career out of being a wine expert. And you got started a while ago, though you're a young man yet, but you got started at a young age at like 19. And how did you hone in on wine as your thing?
Yeah, it's very interesting. You know, I've always been around wine in the sense that literally back to, I remember being probably like 8 or 9 years old and then opening the doors to what was my parents' wine cellar and pulling out bottles and obviously not drinking, but looking at the labels and being sent off on these sort of emotional journeys of trying to understand where places were, not speaking French yet, obviously, and all that. And it was very cool. And then fast forward to, growing up, I grew up in a household where, wine was part of what we did. And I was allowed, again, presuming my grades were still good, to be able to have a glass of wine with water at dinner time. And as I became more of I guess statute of limitations is over, but when I was like a teenager, we were allowed to have wine, a glass of wine, if your grades were good and everything was copacetic and everything. So I continued to segue that way. And then after I moved to Europe, in the late 70s to cook, ostensibly, that was sort of, I felt my career was definitely going to be in hospitality, but I figured I would follow the apple not too far from where it fell off the tree and be a chef. like my mom, I soon learned two things. One, I had this sort of avid wine bug. And when I wasn't working, I would zap to wine country from Paris, which was, 75 minutes away in Champagne or a couple of hours down to the Loire or whatever. This is all pre-TGV, of course. So it did take some time to get to these places. And then I had this revelation a few years later that, if I really wanted to sort of carve out a personal identity and not be known as, Joyce Goldstein's son for the rest of my life, that I really needed to follow a different trailhead, and wine seemed to be logical. It made sense. And when we, opened up Square One in 1984 down in San Francisco's sort of outer financial district, I said I was going to do the wine list, and that's where it began. And a few years later, I passed my MS exam, and le voilà.
And that is quite a journey, which you have continued, working with other wineries and organizations, both nationally and internationally, and also becoming kind of that. The way I learned about you was through Mary Babbitt, and she said she would hear you on the Ron Owens radio show and how awesome you were. We needed to get you on our TV show.
Thank you. And I actually did, before Ron retired, just a couple of years back, I did that show a handful of times a year, as many as you could do without being part of the radio union. I soon learned, but we did that show a bunch, and 30 years almost of being on that show.
My goodness.
You were terrific. And again, it was that same notion. People would call in and ask you their wine questions, and you just had this great way of breaking down the information and making it very palatable. In the midst of doing all of that, you've also written 3 books. We've got to mention that. No moss grows, grows on you, man. You are busy.
I had the pleasure of connecting with University of California Press, over a decade and a half ago at this point in time, and publishing ultimately would be a trio of books with them. The first 2 on food and wine pairing, the kickoff, the original, if you will, Perfect Pairings, which is now, believe in its like 13th or 14th printing or something, backlisted and doing extremely well for people who are really learning about the fundamentals of matching wine with food, fundamentals of matching food with wine, and sort of how to go about it through classic white grapes, classic red grapes, and then sparkling wine and dessert wine on the bookends. And then followed that up a few years later with Daring Pairings, which looks at 36 edgier grapes. It could be, edgier is maybe not that really edgy. It was edgy at the time when we wrote it, but grapes today, like, even Grenache and Tempranillo and Nebbiolo are a bit more mainstream, but we even looked at grapes like, Assyrtiko and Aglianico and such in that book. And it was 36 grapes with 36 recipes from 36 different chefs. And then a few years later after that, I took on another sort of wine area that I love, which was South America, and wrote what was at the time really the most comprehensive continental book on the entire continent, looking at it beyond sort of the prism of Chile and Argentina, which is most what everybody else was doing, but looking at then emerging Uruguay, then emerging Brazil, both which are a little bit more mainstream, and even, exploring now coming into its own Bolivia and Peru, and even the bits and pieces in places as, distinctive as that Paraguay and Ecuador and such.
It's amazing how the wine world keeps growing.
Absolutely. No, it's crazy. I was chatting with some friends over at Vinexpo in Singapore just a few weeks ago, and we were, commenting that there were the first sort of inklings of very, very non-traditional areas appearing. So, not only were the sort of more relative higher hanging fruit, places like Canada, but, efforts from Belgium, efforts from the Netherlands, of course, efforts from England and all that. And it really is becoming a truly global affair. Part of that is due to climate change, of course, but part of that is just simply due to the passion and enthusiasm around the entire métier and the category of wines all over the world.
And do you think that translates into American palates being willing to try new varietals and such? Are we growing as a wine consuming society as well?
No, it's an interesting question and observation. I think the shorter answer is yes. And I think a lot of it depends on where in the continuum you entered the wine world. So, if we can go back to the days of short-armed dinosaurs and pterodons, which is like me, the wine category was fairly limited. We drank classified Bordeaux, we drank Burgundy, we drank Champagne, Napa Valley Cabernet, Barolo, and a fairly, pretty predictable list of top-end fine wines. Fast forward, some 40 plus years, and the younger drinkers of today have none of the original baggage that we had, and they're as comfortable around an Uruguayan Tannat or an Argentine Malbec as they are Yarra Valley Chardonnay or a Belgian Pinot Noir or an English sparkling wine. So it's very interesting to see that. I think there are more heirloom varieties sort of being resurrected, grapes that were clearly not going to happen if it hadn't been for a few passionate and convinced human beings who decided that they shouldn't end up in some seed archive box, but rather continue out there. And then again, just this sort of climate reality that is sort of opening up areas that were historically thought to be too cool for growing grapes. And then all of a sudden you see grapes there. And, even within that, if you take the US as a prism, as you just sort of alluded to, grapes that are, all 50 states make wine today, which is something that not everybody really thinks about, but not all of those grapes are Chardonnay and Cabernet and Zinfandel. And there are certain states that are known more for either Native American grapes or hybrid grapes. And even those grapes are starting to come into fashion a little bit, whether it's, a Vignoles or a Vidal or a Chambourcin and Norton,
right.
A Niagara, all those things are starting to make themselves heard. And given some of the climate realities of today, actually in some cases better suited than traditional vinifera wine grapes.
It's fun listening to you talk, Evan, because you can just hear your excitement, your curiosity, and your passion about wine in every sentence that you give us. And I imagine that had to be part of the appeal for the San Francisco Giants when they decided to make you their team master sommelier. Could you tell us about that journey and about your new position?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, no pun intended, it didn't get pulled out of a Cracker Jack box. So we've been working together, the Giants and myself, for a long period of time. In fact, prior to them being in the current digs of Oracle Park and sort of just south of Market, San Francisco, where it lies, they played at a very wonderful, emotional, but very cold, frigidly cold place called Candlestick Park, located just south of San Francisco. And that was where they moved, in the early 60s, I believe, right after Seal Stadium, where they started and all that. And I've been going to games since I was a little kid. I've been enjoying that for a while. And then when I was working corporate a few decades ago, one of the ideas that we had was, let's start looking, as many people are still doing, literally the day of expanding our audience space and looking for consumers in places that you wouldn't traditionally find them. And one of my dearest friends in the world, fellow master sommelier Nunzio Alioto, with whom I had the pleasure and privilege of passing my exam in London back in 1987, his cousin Mario was running marketing for the Giants at that point in time. And we all sort of connected at one point in time, and he and I decided to sort of pursue this. And we offered the first wine tasting series. I mean, by the way, it should be pointed out that the Giants were actually serving wine at the ballpark in 1977. So years before everybody else was doing it, they were the first major league team to actually offer wine at their concession stands. But we decided to take this a little bit further and offered, walk around trade tastings called Wine Tasting by the Bay that we did for a few years at Candlestick. And then obviously when the team moved from its old digs to its new, just wonderful ballpark at 3rd and King in San Francisco, Oracle Park today, it was AT&T at the time. We just sort of kept things going, and we did events there, and then the team got really busy and really good and won 3 World Series in the interim, and sort of things fell off the radar when you're just sort of busy keeping up with it. And then last fall, one of the senior marketing and partnership executives gave me a call and said, Evan, we have this project. We want to talk to you about it, blah, blah, blah. And it was a project that's still in the process of materializing. It's doing anything with MLB takes a long time. Let's put it that way. But suffice it to say that I said, that's a cool idea. And they said, well, if we're going to do it with anyone, we're going to do it with you and all that. And I was, so that's great. And it's flattering. I said, but think about it at a bigger level. What about this? What about this? What about that? What about this? Wouldn't it be cool if you did that and this and all that? And there was this dead silence on the other end of the cell phone. And they said, those are great ideas. We should do that. And then it literally took us about 3 to 4 months to put sort of an agreement together. And then on September, I believe it was last year, sort of mid-month, we kind of launched it, set it out there, got ridiculous amounts of coverage because I think it was sort of people were so excited about the idea of bringing two of dare I would say America's favorite pastimes and baseball and the enjoyment of wine together and do so in sort of a creative way that looked to bringing wine into the forefront in a place like the San Francisco Bay Area, where if you think about it, one, aside from the fact that there are a huge number of fans that drive in literally from Marin County, Sonoma County, Napa Valley, Livermore, Sacramento, Monterey County, the Peninsula, Cupertino, all of these areas which are actually bona fide wine producing areas. But the fact that, we have all these wine countries literally, in as close as maybe 45 to 60 and as far as maybe just a couple of hours away, it sort of seemed almost like, the Giants had a sort of birthright ownership of really taking this wine category and looking at making it part of their DNA. So we started last fall, we're a few months into the season. We're still figuring things out, realizing that we need to get major, if minimal ground rule doubles and a lot of home runs, and getting that is better than striking out or getting a bunt single. So we're being relatively practiced in how much and how often we're doing things, but so far everything we've done has been extremely well received. We've got, pretty much we're doing like an event or so a month, and just bringing wine more into the vernacular of what's going on for fans.
Great. So exactly how does it work, Evan? How does your role work? What are you doing?
Yeah, so there's two pieces of it, and this is as much for me so that I don't have to field the 12 million phone calls that inevitably happens when I talk about it. I'm not doing the wines at the park per se, that when you walk into and buy a wine, from a wine bar, buy a wine from, the Cloud Club or the whatever, the Gotham Club or whatever, or at a suites level. Those wines are actually selected by the concessionaire who the Giants work with. The Giants, the Giants do not own the licenses, and as such, there is a separation of church and state, and it's actually illegal for me to tell them what wines they need to be doing. So I consult with them on a regular basis. I meet with Sandy and Brian, who are the head of the team who do that, and we work together and do some promotional things. So we're all in agreement. But I want to clarify that right off the bat.
That's really helpful. I did not know that.
Yeah,
I'm
much more
was part of it.
Yeah, no, and certainly if, we're doing interesting promotions and things, they will oftentimes piggyback on what we're doing and work with individual wines that we might have brought in for a promotion or such, or if there's a wine that, we've decided, or it says, hey, we want to be a featured part of, Giants arrangements and promotions and sponsorships and stuff like that, we will work together there. But my role is really to help work with the Giants to come up with events and activations that really bring the Giants closer to their fans. So as I said before, we're doing one a month. We kicked off with an event at FanFest. FanFest is sort of the first event of the year, happens at the ballpark. And we actually took a piece of the ballpark, most notably the wine bar area at the field club level, and turned it into a little walk around tasting. A few of the players showed up and we chatted wine and food with them. Our sponsors for that event were the Sonoma County grape growers. So fans got to try from an array of different Sonoma County wineries. We had Jock Peterson and Luke Jackson come up and share some of their wine stories with us, and we kind of backed and forth with that. We've done individual events at certain particular spots there. We did one at the Cloud Club, which sits on the suites level, but it's sort of an interesting concept. It's kind of like WeWork meets baseball. So people buy credits, and rather than owning a suite, corporations particularly, but even individuals will trade in those credits for access to this sort of semi-private club that they can go into and watch the game at and have food and wines and enjoy them. Nice. We did an event there. We're doing one at the Gotham Club soon. We're doing one on the club level, literally this upcoming Friday for Fan Appreciation Week. 175 people and yours truly will be trying ballpark foods and wines and talking about combos and things like that. We're doing a Giants a staycation event later in July. We're going to do an event out in the bleachers at the 415 TBD later on in the season, and a couple more events, and coming up with a couple of different things. We've been doing scoreboard spots. We've been doing longer play spots that are going to go on YouTube channels and things like that, and just otherwise bringing wine to various touch points at the park, but also encouraging people, through collateral we're developing, and even tips that we're giving at the ballpark to think about, you don't always have to be at a game in the stands to do it. A lot of people watch their baseball at home, with the food they want to have, with the wines and drinks they want to have. So we give them like helpful hints on pairing wine and food and all stuff like that. So we're really looking at just sort of growing and expanding the wine element of a baseball experience to Giants fans, both inside and outside the ballpark.
Nice. And I think it helps a lot that you are a baseball fan yourself.
Yeah, no, I think that's one of the things that makes people feel like, I guess, I'm more legit. I can talk player batting averages and histories of stuff like that. I can tell you where I was when Tim Lincecum struck out 15 in that first playoff game against the Braves. I can tell you where I was when Hunter Pence crashed against the wall, or Tim Kaine caught it, through his perfect game. So yeah, no, I mean, it really helps to do it. I think people trust you a little bit more, that you're both a wine expert and a fan, as opposed to just being a wine mercenary coming in and helping do all of that. But I don't think it would work as well if I wasn't such a fan too. I mean, I think that's made it even more approachable, because even when you're doing an event at the park and, fans approach you or whatever, they're as excited to talk to you about, their baseball thing or a play that happened that evening that you can commiserate on or celebrate together, and then talk about a wine or something like that. So I do think that's been really helpful and beneficial.
Sure. Now, how do you find the team players themselves? Any of the Giants really into wine?
Yeah, that's an interesting element. I kind of quote unquote knew a little bit. I had heard, no pun intended, through the grapevine, that were a couple of players that were really into it. Most notably, the two that I mentioned earlier that attended FanFest in Jock Peterson, who used to be a Dodger. We won't hold that against him. Then went to the Atlanta Braves and won a World Series with Luke Jackson, who was a relief pitcher on that same team. And it was during the run, because as people know, their record was probably no better than 500 at the All-Star break, and then they just went on this torrid run, and got into the playoffs and kept going. And there was sort of a sort of agreement between the two of them that if they won a particular game, let's open up a really nice bottle. And as they kept winning games, not only did the bottles get better, but the group expanded to the point where the whole team was doing it. So when they came to join the Giants, I sort of said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if, maybe we brought those guys in and did something like that? They had this sort of affectionately known club as the Burgundy Bros, because I think the earlier bottles they did were, Burgundy, probably not your basic Burgundy, probably expensive Burgundy, but nevertheless, that was a thing. So when we did the thing at FanFest, the event, and they agreed to come out. We talked for a while and did this, and I actually asked them both ahead of time, because I didn't want to, put them on the spot and then have my debut also result in my being sent down to AAA again, right, or AA, or God forbid, single A, or cut off the team. That we would do this thing at the end. So because it was Sonoma County who was the sponsor, I thought we'd do this playful little thing at the end called Burgundy Not Burgundy. And we'd show them we'd give them two glasses, one of which was a red Burgundy and one of which was a Sonoma County Pinot Noir, and see if they could guess which one was which. And to their credit, and by the way, without tasting, because I think they were optically a little bit reticent about drinking in front of all their fans and all that, they smelled them, they spent some quality time with them. I mean, granted, they had a 50-50 chance of getting it right, but they also had a 50-50 chance of getting it wrong, and they both picked the Burgundy against the Pinot Noir, which I think was really cool for them. And then subsequently we had a going away party after the last exhibition game of the year against the A's, where we took over this sort of ridiculously mansioned house in the East Bay, and went out there, and the players and their significant others came out. We had sort of like a going away party before the year kicked off, and a number of the players came to the event. And I thought it would be fun to bring a case of wine and show them some fun things that perhaps coincided with either where they were from or what I happen to know they loved. And a lot of the players came over and chatted and had a real serious interest in wine. Some of them, again, at sort of like fairly exceptional levels, like they'd actually been drinking wine for years. They knew where these areas were. The aforementioned Luke Jackson actually participated in a harvest of Malbec down in Argentina and all that. And, Mike Yastrzemski has been drinking wine forever because his dad is, of course, a great baseball player and a wine aficionado. So we did all these things, and I chatted with a bunch of them, and a number of the players showed more than avid interest. And, wouldn't it surprise me if down the road, I can't say when, I can't say whatever, but a couple of the players are, possibly interested in getting into it at the same level that those basketball players have been doing for the last couple of years, where there's 50 basketball players who seemingly have their own wines, and yet no active ball players in baseball, with the exception of, a guy named Nolan Arenado, who plays for the Cardinals, who happens to partner with Klay Thompson on his wine here in Northern California. But there's no other baseball players active in doing wine. So, there might be some.
There's several former players though.
Exactly. You've got Dusty Baker, ex-coach of the Giants, who's got an urban winery out in Sacramento. You've got Rich Aurelia, who played with the Giants, who partnered up with Dave Roberts, who's the actual former player, but active manager of the LA Dodgers. They have a wine. The late great Tom Seaver was the first person to get actively into the wine business in California a long time ago, and may he rest in peace. Made some pretty outstanding Cabernets on Diamond Mountain, I might add. But no, beyond that, nothing. Whereas you've got LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, Steph Curry, Carmelo Anthony, James Harden, and the list goes on forever with basketball. So I put that challenge out there.
Ooh, I
you
have
go.
a feeling, that will be heated, no doubt. One of the things you're really good at is food and wine pairing. So as we think baseball and wine, what are some of the stadium standards that you think pair well with wine?
Yeah, well, that, of course, the one usually everybody throws out immediately is the hot dog, because, it is, as you alluded to, even in your intro, a hot dog and a beer and all that. And, and I would sort of say to everybody that I'll give you a simple answer in the interim, but very much a food and wine thing, and to try and get people to just sort of go, and step back for a minute. Even at Oracle Park, your choice of hot dogs is huge. I mean, you've got classic Chicago dogs, you got Louisiana hot links, you got the all beef kosher Frank, you've got the Sheboygan from Wisconsin, you've got all these things. So thinking about what kind of a hot dog actually does play a little bit into that, because, clearly a really spicy Louisiana hot dog, which is going to, exaggerate your perception of alcohol, is very different than a seemingly milder Sheboygan. And then, you throw mustard, you throw relish, you throw ketchup, you all throw those other things. So it really does make people think a little bit. But what I tell people is, okay, bring it down to the basics, Evan. You're having a beef hot dog, brown mustard, some chopped onions, and a little bit of sauerkraut. You need some acid, you need some girth, you need some weight and bold flavor. And I think there's nothing better than a great old glass of good youthful Zinfandel. I think that works really well.
Ooh,
so that's
nice.
one, although you could go off in many directions. One of the other things that you brought up, that we brought up earlier, is, of course, Cracker Jacks. Nobody thinks of Cracker Jacks with wine, but there are some off-dry sparklers, both in cans. There's Prosecco. There's things like that can work very well with the slightly sweet Cracker Jacks that are there. If you do actually find yourself hanging out in some of the more diverse wine areas like the Cloud Club and stuff like that, they actually have like sherries, cream sherries and things like that.
Really?
Quite nicely that's there. But, I think the fizz is good. If you're at home, good bottle of Prosecco or a demi-sec champagne and off-dry bubbly at the park is great, because you once have the sort of crackle and crunch of would be the cracker or the jack? I don't know. And again, it being off dry. Those would be really good.
Those are great ideas.
Yeah, they're really good. And I think even things like peanuts can be fun. You want to cut through the salt and the roasting things. So bright whites, be they Pinot Grigios, which are offered in the park, Sauvignon Blanc, which can be offered in the park. You've got sherry again, which can be offered in the park, things like that there. So there's lots of different foods that we work with and are fun. And I don't think we're not going to change hearts and minds overnight. But if I can just get the average person, we're going to have posted QR codes and Evan's Picks and things like that. But if we could have people just sort of stop for a minute and automatically, rather than reaching for an IPA, think, maybe I should have a Merlot. Maybe I should have a Cab, whatever. With that tri-tip sandwich or something, we'll have done some real good. And again, sort of push forward to this sort of multi-year process, which is changing the way people think about wine with sports.
Great. Now, it's a stereotype, but, the average ballpark attendees drinking beer How do you convince the beer lovers to try a little bit of wine?
Well, I think you do so at a couple of levels. Number one, I think one of the easiest transitions to make for people is if they are looking for suds and they are looking for, lower alcohols to sort of use sparkling wines as sort of a fun way to play in, but also just let people know that, different flavors work well, that, while the beer is oftentimes going to actually be a nice, and I don't say this judgmentally, but simply reality, sort of a passive dining experience. You're enjoying your beer, you're enjoying your hot dog, your hamburger, whatever, that actually having a glass of wine with it where the flavors work really well together can be a quite enjoyable thing. And, when we did this at the Fan Fest, we picked a handful of ballpark foods and brought some wine up and literally dragged people out of the audience and said, here's the thing. We think this works really well. Give it a thought. You like it? Do you not? If you don't like it, that's cool too. And I think a lot of people, literally the number of folks that came out and said, I never thought about that. I would have never thought about having, a glass of Chardonnay with my Crazy Crab sandwich, or I would have never thought about having a glass of just easygoing Cabernet with my tri-tip, or my, a nice bowl of a glass of Merlot with my cha-cha bowl or whatever. God, they work so well. So I think part of it is going to be power of suggestions. I think some of these scoreboard features in between innings where we sort of show people a food they can have, a wine, and talk to them in very easy, approachable things, what that is. I was not at the game last week, but I was told by a couple of friends who sent pictures and stuff to me that we had a Sauvignon Blanc and garlic fries pairing, on the stage. For those of you who are not familiar with garlic fries, it's, French fries that have basically been tossed with garlic butter and chopped parsley and all of that. And it's an actually delightful combo because not only does the acid cut through the richness, the butter and the fry and picks up on the earthiness there, but the green elements from the parsley work really well with the Sauvignon Blanc. And so we talked a little bit about that. And my friend said you could literally see people, that the amount of glasses in hands visible that day at the ballpark went up, significantly, simply due to a suggestion. So we've got about 6 or 8 of those spots that we're going to run during the course of the season. We're going to do, like I said, some pop-ups, some pregame things. We're even going to do some fun stuff. We're talking about, like, chatting with a winemaker friend of mine who happens to be from Texas. He was saying, wouldn't it be cool if we could find some little cute pop-up venue at the park when the Rangers come to town, Texas winemakers, Texas Rangers, Texas wines made in California, blah, blah. So we're trying to think of just also interesting, opportunistic, in a good way, opportunistic, sort of like pop-up things and sampling opportunities to just bring wine, again, as I keep saying, more just into the sort of emotional and organoleptical forefront of their minds.
Sure.
I love it. It's a great idea. And I think it's time. It's a movement whose time has come. As you said, it's not just a hot dog at the Giant Stadium anymore. You can get your brat and your spicy Louisiana dog. And so why not expand the palate further when it comes to the beverages we're drinking at the ballpark?
I mean, they already sold, before I even got there, 80,000 glasses of wine were sold last year at the ballpark. 80,000 glasses of wine.
I don't even want to think about how many I'm responsible for.
I don't know. It's a push. It's a push, but we're hoping to beat that this year and beat it reasonably handily.
So, Evan, these events that you talk about, are they open to all fans, or you have to get a special ticket?
It's a great question, and some of them are and some of them aren't. So like the one we're doing this Friday, if you're a season ticket holder, because it's Fan Appreciation Week, and you were one of the first 175 to click yes that I'll be there, you could go to that event if you're a season ticket holder. If you happen to be on, if you happen to have been at one of these other places like the Cloud Club through your purchase membership and all that, you could be there. Gotham Club, same. I do think that some of these events that we're going to do, like, this Triples Alley event we're talking about doing in the fall, that would have sort of like a special extra ticket thing that you would have to purchase. So none of them are free. Obviously, you can't give away wine for free from an alcoholic beverage legal standpoint anyway. But I do think that one of the subjects that we talked about here, and again, whether we do this is like wine, field trips and things like that, is trying to make these events accessible to a larger group of people so that you do not have to be a corporate sponsor in a suite on the luxury level, drinking, $200 Cabernet, to really partake. So I said very strong, very vociferously that I wanted to do a couple of events in the cheap seats this year. And I say that with great affection. I like to sit in the cheap seats myself at times with all the fans and have some of these events for them. So yeah, I would just tell people to, if they're not already on the Giants website or getting Giants promotions or whatever, just, keep watching, keep hearing about them, because, we're starting small, but we will sort of build over time. And I do hope that people do understand that we're trying to bring these things down at everyday levels. And of course, even through just following up on recommendations that we make, there are 7 freestanding wine bars at Oracle Park. There's Vintage 58, which is sort of a wine bar with more expanded offerings that they have. There's offerings at every single level. There's lots of ways to enjoy wine already. You can literally order it in the seats if you're at a place that has seat service and stuff like that. And wine touches people in a lot of places, certainly more than most other ballparks do.
Fun. Well, I'm super glad you're doing this. And, one of the questions we got from one of our listeners has to do with kind of wine and the image of the team. So I'm going to go ahead. This one is an audio one. So I'm going to go ahead and play it for you. If
Sure.
That's cool. Okay.
Absolutely.
Let's see if I can get it to play. Ready? Here we go.
Hi, Evan. This is Chuck. I know many years ago, 49er fans were often called Chardonnay fans as a slight against them. How do you see Giants fans? Is it just the Bay Area and maybe we're just more cultured?
That's a great question. I mean, I think that obviously you've got 2 elements of it. So, number one is, of course, the surplus, the on-site thing. And I think that the people that come to Giants games are we tend to eat well and drink well in the Bay Area, and that's not just, even the beer drinkers are drinking Lagunitas. I mean, they're not drinking Bud Light per se. So I do think you have this epicentered culture around things. They're there, and I think it's worth pointing out again that the Giants look at their demographic, and they've looked at the demographic, and the person coming in is X percentage point, the data people do this, but they're X percentage more likely to enjoy and have wine at a game than other fans are who are not. And as I said before, you do have fans who come in from wine country and want to enjoy wine at the game. So while Chardonnay drinkers are still out there, and in fact, like I said, the Chardonnay Crazy Crab sandwich is a pretty darn good match as well. We're starting to see different kinds of wines, different price point wines, and all of that. And a number of other teams have interestingly sort of kick the tires to kind of hear what we're doing, see what we're doing and all of that. So I think they look at it, again, both as a lifestyle and experiential thing. They're not idiots. They're looking at it from a revenue standpoint as well too, because people are, wine generally per glass is a bit more than a lot of those beers are, but they are just finding that it's offering fans what they want. It's giving people what they want, where they want, when they want. And they've found that over the years, again, Giants served the first wines as far back as, I guess it would be literally almost 50 years ago, 77 plus 23, 46 years ago to do that. So, they want to keep doing that and growing that as part of who this team is.
That is so cool. So when you order wine at Oracle Park, what are they serving it in? Is it in a Dixie cup?
Yeah, there's
a wine glass.
Absolutely. I think a lot of it depends on where you are. Clearly, if you're in some of the more luxury scenarios, like at a suite or at the Gotham Club, which is a members only club, or at the Cloud Club, where they do have glasses, those will be in glassware. I will say, though, that in most of the other places, you're not getting wine in funky little paper cups and all that. They've worked to design these sort of plastic cups. If you've ever been to Outside Lands or something like that, and they've got those sort of plastic cups that, you can grab. They even have the 3 little indent things there for your fingers and all that. They're decent plastic. They look like a relatively, again, in the context of plastic, sheer rim rather than a bald rim. And so they use that in most places there. And even in things like, tasting venues, rather than giving you those silly little plastic specimen cups that look like you should be going to your doctor's office, They give you like a cup, and the plastic cup can probably hold somewhere in the realm of like, 8 to 10 ounces or something like that. So they're reasonable. And I think it make people, because people do, as we all know from being in our industry, people drink with their eyes, and drinking like a really nice wine out of a really, inappropriate vessel is going to downgrade the experience there. So I think they do what they can, from the standpoint of just legalities and liability and all that. Getting glass out there for everybody is probably not going to happen. People do worry about safety and things like that.
And those the little plastic ones, the little plastic wine glassy type things, are so practical. It makes sense. You're climbing down the stairs to your seat and all that. You don't really want to be dealing with glass.
Absolutely. And you know what? And people bring them home. They keep them. They use them outside. They have picked them for their own picnics and stuff like that. So they are something that is sort of much a keepsake. Some of the higher end wines, you actually get these really hip plastic decanters with your cups. And I've seen them at people's houses. People take them home, and they really are good. I mean, I don't think people use them in their house so much, but Giants aren't dummies. They've got San Francisco Giant branding on their little cups. So people think about them as well. But whether you're at the beach, having a picnic in your own backyard, et cetera, they can actually be, upcycled, I guess would be the right term.
So I think it was earlier this year, like, I don't want to say, maybe March, if I'm getting it right, the Giants lowered the price of like your
Bud Light.
But was it Bud? Yeah.
Bud Light. No, that's the only beer that it was there. So I know people were probably, I'm sure the Bud Light drinkers were absolutely thrilled about it, but I think anyone who was drinking their, other beers was probably like, aren't you going to take those beers down proportionally? And
what about me?
The answer was no. We haven't seen the same with wine prices. But the nice thing about wine at the ballpark is you do have, inexpensive offerings to luxury offerings and various different price points in between. You can get them by the glass, you can get them by the bottle. So I do think there are a nice array of options for people. And, even if you're just, literally walking to a freestanding wine bar and all that, there's an array of price points available for people in different glasses. I think the biggest thing that, we will probably explore over time is, are these wines all going to be California wines? And are these wines all going to be Northern California wines? And I think that the short answer—
that's actually one of my questions from one of our listeners wanted to know, since this area, the greater Bay Area, throwing in Napa, Sonoma, Monterey County and everything, produces such great wines. Will the Giants be offering exclusively local wines?
I would say exclusively the answer is no. I would say that, we'd be crazy to not take advantage of who we are, where the wineries are, providing them an opportunity to know that we're supporting them as much as they're supporting us. So I think it will be California heavy for the foreseeable future, but I do think we will diversify within California. I think Napa and Sonoma are wonderful, but as the two of you know well, that's 10% of all wine made in California. And there are 40 plus other counties making wine. Some of them are very delicious, and making sure that we offer those up, particularly as we understand where our fan base is located. But I do think that there are places for not only other states, if the Seattle Mariners are coming into town, let's offer something from Washington. If the Toronto Blue Jays are in town, let's offer up a wine from Canada. We have opportunities to do things like that. We also have the opportunity, being that we are multinational, not necessarily in baseball, but, Oracle Park also hosts concerts. They also host soccer games. And if, FC Barcelona and Real Madrid are doing a friendly, why not have some Spanish wine in the park? If, the Mexican national team is up here scrimmaging against whatever, why not have some wine from Guadalupe Valley and Baja there? So we're really looking at trying to really pinpoint and sort of connect the dots in certain appropriate areas where it makes sense, and offering a diversified set, once again, to sort of just reaffirm the position on wine. But no, I think that California will always be the lion's share of the offerings there, again, with spot appropriate complementary glasses and bottles being offered.
That's so awesome. So we had a lot of questions about baseball and wine, but we also asked our listeners to send us questions to ask you as a master sommelier. This question comes from a woman in Palm Desert, and she wants to know what is a red wine that's not too heavy that she can drink in the summer, but it's also a good value.
Yeah, no, there fortunately for her, there's so many correct answers in this one. So I would say that within the world of red wines and red wine grapes, one of the things we know is that all red grapes are not created equally. Some of them are produce wines that are more of gravitas, and they're big and tannic and need oak barrels and need time in bottle and all that. And those are not particularly light quaffable, nor are they usually inexpensive. So my go-tos when trying to hit that category, certainly a couple of grapes come to mind. Gamay, the grape of Beaujolais, which is also wonderfully delicious when thrown into the ice bucket for about 10 or 15 minutes. It's bright, it's soft on tannin, it's high on fruit, it's beautiful with a diversity of foods, and it's always a good value for the money, even at the more expensive cru levels. They can be, but your sort of basic Beaujolais or Beaujolais Village is just wonderfully crushable, delicious wine for the summer. I would say Dolcetto, an Italian grape that comes from Piemonte, is similar in profile, a little bit darker in color, but also sort of oozing with beautiful strawberry flavors, soft tannins, brightness, and just easy to enjoy, easy to work there. I think that certain styles of Merlot and Pinot Noir also fit that bill too, neither of those grapes being super tannic unless by intent made that way. Merlot prices are very fair vis-a-vis quality ever since Sideways and Miles pulled the rug out of the Merlot market and has made that to be, you always drink better than the price you're paying for it. And Pinot Noir too, although certainly a delicious Pinot Noir is no longer as inexpensive as it once was. As long as you're willing to go off the trailhead a little bit and diversify your likings from the Sonoma Coast to Russian River, there's some delightful Pinots coming out of Chile and Argentina. There's some delightful Pinots coming out of Marlborough, New Zealand that are, less expensive and really good and equally as pleasure providing. So I would say Gamay and Dolcetto on one end, Pinot Noir and Merlot on another end. That would probably be a nice roster, no pun intended, to start with.
Love that. And you mentioned chilling the Beaujolais, and I think that's something people don't think about, that when it's warm or hot, that you should go ahead and chill your red wines.
Oh, most definitely. And I think the rule of thumb there is the less tannic the wine, the easier it is to chill. Okay. So I wouldn't do that with a Cabernet. I wouldn't do that with a Nebbiolo, but something that's relatively transparent as far as tannic structure goes, like a Beaujolais Nouveau, like a Dolcetto, like a Rioja or Spanish Garnacha. It has no oak whatsoever. That's really just about fruit and deliciousness. All of those wines can be thrown into an ice bucket, or dare I say, into your freezer for 10 or 15 minutes and enjoyed, particularly on a warm day, al fresco, on a picnic. Lots of options.
Nice. Okay, here's one from an apartment dweller in Boston where it gets hot in the summer. Where should I store my wine? I live in an apartment and don't have a wine cellar or wine fridge.
Yeah, boy, that's a dilemma that people not only in Boston, but other places face as well. I would say a couple of fold. Number one, if you don't have air con in your house, if you don't have central air conditioning, I'm hopeful and confident that maybe you have one of those little beautiful portable floor aircon units that are out there these days that are not super expensive and all that can move from room to room with you as you move about your house. And you have a couple of them, keeping them on a little bit here and there is a good thing. But if you don't have a wine fridge, if you don't have a cellar or basement, my recommendation would be find the coolest, darkest corner of your closet and just put like a freestanding case box up there, and keep a dozen bottles there, rotate through them. One of the things that wine doesn't like if you have warm weather a lot is long-term storage. You really do need good conditions for storing wines 2, 3, 5+ years out. But if you're in the summer and you're pretty much turning your wine over regularly, and you're holding wines for maybe, I don't know, a week or two, couple weeks here and there, having just a box in your dark closet nearby, and maybe trying to keep that room a little bit cooler through a portable aircon unit is a good way to go. And then as the weather cools down, obviously you can have them a little bit less exposed, but you can also assume that the temperature being more consistent and cooler, even that same box of wine, you can have wines that you don't have to worry about, a month, 2 months, 3 months down the road.
Great. This one comes from a woman who is looking at doing some of the wine certification exams and wants to know, How long did it take you to become a master sommelier, and what was the process like?
Let's put it this way. Back in 1987, one, there weren't simply the array of educational learning opportunities that there are today. B, there were barely any books. And C, if people remember, there was no internet. There was no immersion trips for going to regions. Wine hospitality around the world was relatively minimal. So back then, we did a lot of self-study. Back then, you worked hard to proactively get the information, try the wines. There were barely even wine bars then for you to go try things by the glass. Today, of course, you have a lot of options. I guess I should sandwich that by saying, when I went for my MS, there was no level 1, level 2. You walked into level 3 and then took level 4 right afterwards. So there was a very short list of 20 of us who went to that first class in Monterey during the Monterey Wine Festival during 1987, of which ultimately I believe 10 or 11 of us passed. So it was a good group of people, but we didn't have the luxury of reading, studying, going online, watching YouTube videos, doing all that stuff. So we did it there, and we also started there. So today, I think the average consumer or trade person alike can literally pick programs based on who they are, where they're at in their level of learning, and then can augment that through trips, can augment that through in-person classes. But a lot of this stuff you can do online these days. WSET levels 1, 2, and 3 are offered as online courses as well as in person. The Court of Master Sommeliers offers an online introductory program in addition to the in-person things. A number of schools offer hybrid programs. You can literally do these under the auspices of your own home. And then there's a lot of kits out there. We, even in my own company, we offer Master the World, which are these wonderful monthly subscription kits, that can be as, you can go for being a Jedi Knight training and blind taste the wines, or you can simply order them and pull the labels off and just expand your discernment and drinking experiences. So I think the opportunities and options available for people there are great, but clearly, understand two things. One, not everybody who wants to take a wine class wants to be a master sommelier or master of wine. The people that want to hit that upper part of the pyramid are very few, and it's very steep, and the air is very thin. But I think for your average person learning there, getting a WSET level 1 and 2, possibly 3, or a CMS level 1 and maybe level 2 certification are pretty approachable, pretty doable for everybody. And even, most places, whether you're at, in Boston, where we were just talking about with the Commonwealth Wine School, or San Francisco Wine School here, there are a lot of opportunities of different programming available, much of which is very, entry level through expert level. And people should take advantages of what's available, both live in their market and then increasingly online offerings.
Okay, good advice. All right, here's another audio question. It comes from Krista. Let's see if I can get it to play.
Hi, this is Krista, and I have a question for Evan. What do they mean when they talk about legs on a glass, and does that really matter?
Great question, Krista. The legs on a glass, often referred to as the tiers, are simply a physical effect. So a couple things happen. Number one, you've got to have a decent wine glass that is tall enough with enough volume in it. Then when you swirl it around, and if you're an expert, you can do this in your hand. If you're not an expert, you can literally leave the glass on your table. And for those folks who remember a game called Spirograph, right, where you would swirl the thing around, make little things like that. If you literally place Spirograph at the base of that cup, by definition, the wine will start swirling around in the glass. And what you want to pay attention to here is the height, the highest point to which the glass reached, and then note as the wine falls down the inside of the glass, the speed and the thickness of these so-called tiers or legs that are there. They are not the end-all to end-all, and if your glass is a little bit dirty, they may not even form. But in a glass that is clean, you will oftentimes, particularly with higher alcohol wines, have these little tiers or rivulets or legs fall down there, and you want to pay attention to the thickness and the velocity of them. Generally, the thicker and slower the tearing, the higher the alcohol and or residual sugar of the wine, and the faster or even sheeting as opposed to legging you see going on in the inside of the glass usually refers to a lower alcohol wine that's bone dry. So, Pinot Grigio may sheet down the inside of a glass. A port may literally creep down the glass with very thick legs that are actually probably even have some color into it. So sometimes it's fun to try and get an understanding of these things, to pick two extremes and do them side by side so you can actually experience it. So I might suggest and it doesn't have to be fancy, expensive port. You just go out there and get like a bottle of or half bottle of Ruby port, and then something like, a 9 to 10% Italian Pinot Grigio. Pour them in two glasses, swirl the glasses around, and note the difference on what's falling down on the inside of the glass, and you'll see literally, vividly, and experience firsthand what legs are all about.
Interesting.
Wow. Speaking of alcohol levels in wine, this is from Helen, who is concerned about or curious about lower alcohol wines with the low and no or zero proof movement. Not sure she wants to give up wine completely, but she wants to know, what are some lower alcohol wines that she can enjoy without having to worry about getting a headache or anything like that?
Just over imbibing. Yeah. First and foremost, let me say, and I will knock out on a soapbox here, but I am personally saddened by the fact that there's so many bottles of wine out there that say things like no sugar added and this and that and all that, because I think it sends out some incorrect messaging about the wines and all that. But there are some lower alcohol wines that are actually lower alcohol by the way they are, not so much treated in such a way that some of the alcohol is removed or dealcoholized or whatever, spun with a cone or something like that. So I would look for wines that are lower in alcohol. They tend to come from cooler climate areas. So Northern Italian, white, and even some of the red wines are lower in alcohol. German and Austrian wines are lower in alcohol. Places that are cool climate in general are going to be lower in alcohol. When we say lower in alcohol here, that could be as low as literally like 8%, 7% alcohol, or it could be as high as maybe 12%, 13%. But your typical wines today, for various reasons, depending on provenance and climate and all that, are going to be somewhere between, a low of probably 13 and a quarter, upwards to 15, 16%. So you can find wines out there if you do a little bit of diligence and looking and searching and understanding where those wines come from, that are in some cases half the alcohol of what some of the other extremes are. But you don't have to go out and get buy a dare I say, gimmicky wine, a better for you, no low out, whatever, that's been sort of manipulated into that place, and get wines that are naturally lower in alcohol in general. A Moscato d'Asti is about 5.5, 6% alcohol, and that's a delicious, albeit off dry wine. It maybe not for your steak, but at times where you just want to enjoy a glass of something and not have to worry about your alcoholic intake.
Absolutely.
I love that. That's really great.
And I will join you on that soapbox, Evan. I think there's a lot of misleading marketing that's going on.
Totally.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
All right. This is one from my mom, Evan.
Go, Mom.
My mom and her friends were talking about wine the other day, and they decided that they all love screw caps. They don't want to deal with corks and corkscrews at their age. They feel that they're too hard for seniors to open the wine bottles. So the question is, do you see more wineries moving toward a screw cap? And I actually think Helene feels that perhaps you are in charge of making this happen for her. So
that's very sweet. I would say with you, first and foremost, a lot of it kind of depends, quote unquote, on where you are in the world. If you are in Australia, if you are in New Zealand, your ability to find a wine that is sealed with a cork is pretty much nil, because almost everything over there has screw caps. So maybe it's worth a trip to Australia, New Zealand, if for no other reason than opening things up. Screw caps were developed for for multiple reasons. One, certainly ease of use and simplicity, but part of it was also due to the fact that there were winemakers who were extremely frustrated by the quality of the corks that they were using in places where the end use of it was far away from the source. So most corks come from like Portugal or Spain, North Africa, Southern Italy. Well, getting those corks all the way to Australia, all the way to South America, all the way, not only is timely, but it's expensive, and they weren't getting the best corks and they weren't getting them in a timely manner. So they were having disproportionate failure rates with their corks, wines that were off, wines that tasted bad. So the screw cap technology certainly eliminates right off the bat any of the cork related problems that you have. But like anything else, the earlier technologies, sometimes you would spit, they wouldn't come off. Sometimes they would leak. Sometimes they were difficult. And a lot of the naysayers told people that, well, when you put a screw cap on a wine, you essentially freeze that wine in suspended animation, and it's not going to get any better. It's not going to change at all. But even today, modern day screw caps actually have gotten technology that mimics the micro-oxygenation factor that corks have, so that over time, small amounts of oxygen actually can find themselves into the wine. So it literally does the same thing. I think screw caps are rock and roll. If everybody used screw caps, I would be thrilled. Personally, I think that a lot of people have emotional baggage with corks, that particularly for really expensive wines, people can't get past their emotional baggage there and just sort of assume that if it's an expensive wine, it has to be cork finished. But there's nothing like buying an expensive wine, popping the cork and having it be bad versus just unscrewing a cap and having it be delicious and all that. And I think as time goes on, more and more higher end wines are being closed with screw cap closures. I think the biggest challenge is not so much for restaurants where people are more accustomed to seeing it. It makes wine by the glass programs really easy and all that. But I've seen the biggest problem and heard the biggest concerns amongst my friends who are retailers, who say that for gifting, you don't want to come to somebody's house and bring a bottle of wine over with the screw cap because it quote unquote makes you seem cheap, unless you happen to know that the people at the other end know their wine and will recognize the wine for the wine and not for the screw cap. But I think there's increased acceptance of screw caps. And like I said, depending on where you are in the world, you may be hard pressed to find anything but screw caps just because of the way their cultures have bought in and embraced them.
Sure. Well, speaking of corks, and this question's coming from me, that sometimes I'll get a shipment of wine, and especially during maybe the warmer months, the cork is kind of pushing up against the foil.
Yeah.
That's one. And the second part of it is, what does it mean when I have a wine in my rack where when I go to pull it out, there's some stickiness on the foil, or if there's no foil, it's on the cork top, and it seems like maybe it's been leaking. What does that mean?
Well, I think all of those things are certainly red lights. I mean, you should, or maybe orange lights. You should certainly look at them. If you've been, received some wine either through a shipment, or let's say you were in wine country and it happened to be hot that day, and you put the wines in the trunk of your car, and you did notice that the corks pushed a little bit, either pushing against the foil or broken the foil or something like that. That could be an issue. What I would say is that if it's just done once and you get it down to a good storage temperature, chances are you probably have not damaged your wine. What wines don't like is being mistreated over extended periods of time. So the question that we addressed earlier about my wine storage that's too warm all the time will literally potentially cook or certainly accelerate the aging process, which is why cool is there. But as long as you're not leaving it in the car for a week or two, even if your cork pushed a little bit, I wouldn't be too concerned about it. I'd bring it home and I wouldn't worry. I would worry a little bit more if I did see sort of stickiness or corks that when I pulled the cork out had veins of wine throughout them, where clearly the wine had penetrated in there. However, having said that, I would still open the wine and try the wine before I would admittedly either prejudge it or just assume that it was bad or something. Because I have had wines from bottles that leaked. I have had wines from bottles that were a little sticky that were just fine. So I think that it's one of those things that it's kind of like when somebody hands you a cork in a restaurant, which they're doing less and less these days. But when they do, and you notice that the cork is broken into a couple of pieces or crumbles a little bit, that's a note to me, aha, I should be paying extra special attention to the wine when I'm trying it, but I shouldn't assume that the wine is off or the wine is bad. I've had corks that I know for a fact probably cost about $1.50 per cork, sealing a really expensive bottle, and the wine behind it was terrible because the wine was corked. So pay attention to the wine, not to the cork, and be aware of the cues around you, but don't let them pre-decide something. Have the confidence to do it yourself. Or if you don't, ask somebody who you do have confidence in to help make that call for you.
That's great advice.
Evan Goldstein, you are just chock full of great information. And I say this every time, I could talk to you all day.
Oh, you're so kind.
And so, you hit it out of the park on this one, Evan. Sorry for the baseball pun, but we sure appreciate the time spent with us today and answering our listener questions. And I hope we got to all of them. If not, send any others along, and we'll make sure we pass them on to Evan for you. And Evan, you have ways people can reach you as well.
Absolutely. You can certainly find me through probably the easiest, most common way to find me these days is we do have a website for Master the World. That's our subscription wine kits that we do, which are both available to everybody who wants to buy them and purchase them. But we also do supply, as we were talking about wine education earlier, we are the online supplier for the Court of Master Sommeliers, for multiple WSET APPs, for Guild Somm for their blind tastings, as well as the Culinary Institute of America, the CIA, for their beverage master's program. But you can find us through there for all of those products and more. And that's at mtwwines.com, mtwwines.com, or Evan at mtwwines.com will always find me, and I'm pretty good on my email.
Great. And I will put that in our show notes on our website.
Thank you. And just good drinking out there, everybody. Enjoy the summer. Enjoy all of what summer brings, wine-wise, food-wise, and of course, going back to where we started, a great time of year to go to the ballpark with your friends, with your family, enjoy company, enjoy experience, and enjoy, I hope, a really good glass of wine with whatever it is you're eating.
All right, old friend. Thank you, Evan, for the time with us. We've thoroughly enjoyed it. Cheers to you, Evan Goldstein, and sip, sip, hooray.
Yes. Cheers, Evan. You've made us all smarter. Thank you, and enjoy the summer at the ballpark.
Well, we certainly enjoyed that conversation with our dear friend, Evan Goldstein. As we said, he's a font of knowledge, and so fun that he's running the wine program for the San Francisco Giants. I know it's just going to continue to get better and better, and he'll bring more people into the wine tent with him.
Absolutely. Non-baseball fans, I think they might be changing their tune. Mm-hmm. Anyway, and if you liked what Evan's advice was and hearing about that, we've got more great stories like that. Visit our website, sipsiphooraypodcast.com. We'll have show notes from today's episodes, but you can also find all of our episodes there. Go back and do some binge listening while you're driving on summer vacation or wherever you're headed. You can also find us on Substack and sign up for a subscription there, and you will get an email when all of our new episodes drop, and some other extra goodies from us coming along the way. You can follow us on social media, Sip Sip Hooray Podcast on Instagram and Facebook, and Sip Sip Hooray, the number 1 on Twitter.
So yeah, I think you're getting the message. We want you to keep in touch with us, and we want to let you know when our podcasts drop so that you can listen, you can rate us, you can comment on them, and you can share them with your friends. That really helps us as well.
Right, absolutely. Well, Mary, this has been a super fun episode once again. Everybody, thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned for the next pod.
All right, cheers to you, Mary Orland.
Cheers, Mary Babbitt. Sip, sip, hooray.
Sip, sip, hooray.